Hello, this is Matt on the Moon Family Sedan channel. We've been able to watch XRP merge with traditional finance over the years. We're also seeing an increase in the merging of the crypto asset class in general with traditional finance, with major news breaking in terms of the developments of traditional finance getting into crypto, specifically having to do with all sorts of firms, most notably BlackRock, and their efforts to get the SEC to approve a spot Bitcoin ETF. And it's hard to overstate the degree to which that will be just the most momentous occurrence that you could possibly imagine from this particular moment in time. I mean, the magnitude of the money that will ultimately flow in as a result of these types of moves, again, I don't know how to overstate it. It's a gigantic deal, and we are seeing this actually happen. So all the scary stuff happening, with the SEC suing everyone under the sun that's in crypto. But it looks like Attorney Deaton, his theory in terms of, hey, just making space for the incumbent players, well, it certainly tracks. And I'm going to share with you the most recent development just to prove this point. It's so hypocritical. It's so hypocritical. If it pans out, it's going to be like the most obviously hypocritical thing, because it has to do with BlackRock like tripling down on their partnership with Coinbase specifically, as the SEC is trying to pummel them into non-existence. And so it's just like I'll just save it for the rest of the video. Let's get out of the interior. But before going further, I do want to be clear. I do not have a financial background of any kind. I am not offering financial advice, and you definitely should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. I'm just an enthusiast who enjoys making YouTube videos about crypto-related topics, but just as a hobby and just for fun. Now, let me just share something that some of you are aware of, but even if you are aware, let me just set a little reminder here, because what's going on here with the merging of all of this, like it does look like there are major players behind the scenes, pulling strings, as if they're puppet masters. Now, if you know me, you know that I am not interested in conspiracy theories in a general sense. It doesn't mean I'm not a curious individual. If you want to bring me some evidence that's, show me some reasonable dots to be connected, I'm down. There's some people that get way more out into conspiracy theory land because their brains are wired differently than mine, and they're more eager to accept, just way out their theories. Whereas me, I'm more skeptical. I need more evidence. If you're going to put out really big, assertions, you better bring something to me, or else I'm going to be like, okay, interesting. Why do you believe that? Like, to actively believe it? Why should I? So, although I'm not like that, and I'm glad that I can prove all this. And I don't pretend to have like a ton of connections. I do have some connections having to do with finance in the world of crypto, just by the nature of me becoming, to whatever degree, known within the XRP community. So there's some. I'm not pretending to be some really well-connected guy, but there are some individuals that I have made connections with. And as a result, I remember it was either May or June of last year, I shared with you guys that I'd heard through the grapevine from people in finance that BlackRock was going to be jumping in crypto. That was in either May or June of last year. I was reporting that on my channel. And the news broke that BlackRock was jumping into crypto, including partnerships with Coinbase, in August of last year. So it just took a matter of months. And I shared at that time that I had also been made aware that the strategy, in all likelihood, with people in the know coming through the grapevine, was that BlackRock ultimately would be, because mind you, they're basically copying Grayscale's Bitcoin Trust. That's basically what they didn't pioneer it. They're just copying it from Grayscale. And they wanted to do what Grayscale was seeking to do, which is convert ultimately a Bitcoin Trust into a spot Bitcoin ETF, which is a gigantic deal, because you're talking about real actual Bitcoin needing to be purchased to back this thing. And it would be accessible to people on regular, traditional stock exchanges, whether it's NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange. And so I was talking about that in August of last year. I was just saying, hey guys, this is what I'm being told from people in the know. It's coming through the grapevine. So don't be surprised if BlackRock ultimately files for a spot ETF. And don't be surprised if, because of the nature of their connections, they're the ones that get approved. So all of this has come to pass to this point. The last piece of the puzzle, perhaps, will be, does the approval actually occur? Will BlackRock be the first firm to ever get approved for a spot Bitcoin ETF. Because what I've heard over this year plus through the grapevine is that it will be them in all likelihood, although not guaranteed, in all likelihood, because they're the most well-connected, because they're the largest, they have the most assets under management of any firm of their type on the entire planet. Something like 10 trillion in assets under management. They're connected with individuals at the highest levels of governments around the world. So if someone's going to get approved, it's going to be the incumbent, the biggest one, BlackRock. That's been the expectation in traditional finance for some time. And so what we're seeing here is that there's this weird song and dance going on here with the SEC going after Coinbase, yet understanding, and you'll see why I say this as I go through the video, they understand that BlackRock, the decision has been made. They are pro Coinbase. They're going in whole hog with Coinbase. So check this out. Let me just set the table, because it was the middle of June when we got the news that BlackRock was officially going to file for this spot Bitcoin ETF. And so here's an article from June 16th titled BlackRock May Have Found Way to Get SEC Approval for Spot Bitcoin ETF. And so you may recall that one of the reasons, just in a general sense, the SEC is swatting down all of the requests for spot Bitcoin ETFs literally for a decade now, mind you, with Gemini having filed the first request for one literally a decade ago. One of the reasons they're articulating, which I don't buy into, but it has to do with concerns about manipulation of Bitcoin markets, effectively, price manipulation. And so the SEC doesn't want to approve such a thing if that's something that's going to be happening. Just in a general sense, that was the argument. And so the assertion here, as of the middle of June, just a few weeks ago, was that BlackRock found a way to get around that concern. And this is what would ultimately lead to approval for a spot Bitcoin ETF. It's what follows. So check this out. BlackRock's iShares Bitcoin Trust application to the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission this week might stand a better chance than previous attempts by other fund managers, thanks to the promise of a surveillance sharing agreement. That's the key word, surveillance sharing agreement, or SSA for short, between exchanges. On page 36 of the NASDAQ 19B4 filing, which is where the proposed ETF would be listed, it's stated that to mitigate against market manipulation, NASDAQ will be brought into enter into a surveillance sharing agreement with an operator of a spot trading platform for Bitcoin. Surveillance sharing agreements allow for the sharing of information about market trading activity, clearing activity, and customer identification, allowing for little possibility of market manipulation. So that's it in a nutshell. And apparently that had not been tried before. But hey, we're just, here's what we're going to make sure we do. We're just going to watch the market. And so this is a little trick that needed to be played in order for finally a fund to get approved by the SEC. Well, there you go. BlackRock was going to do it. But all was not perfect. Take a look at this. And this was shared by, there's a tweet from somebody named Andrew. And this was retweeted by attorney John Deaton. He's the founder of X3. I'm not familiar. I just know, the only reason I know who this is at this point is he pops up in my feed because certain people, including attorney John Deaton, happen to pretty regularly retweet stuff from him. So he's certainly somebody who is well respected and people appreciate his insight in the world of crypto. I don't really pretend to know anything about that beyond him, but here's what he shared just a few days ago on June 30th. He wrote, update. SEC claims that current spot Bitcoin ETF submissions are inadequate per Wall Street Journal. Oh, wait a minute. What about all this stuff that I've been hearing for the grapevine for over a year now about how BlackRock was the chosen one because they have the connections and the government and all that? What about all that stuff? And you're saying here that the SEC has already determined that the BlackRock spot Bitcoin ETF, it's already inadequate? That's being reported by the Wall Street Journal? Uh-oh, trouble in paradise. But anyway, Andrew goes on. He says, Gensler's SEC takes swipe at the likes of BlackRock, Fidelity, and others, despite increased surveillance adjustments via NASDAQ and EDX. And then you have this, Andrew shared this from Bloomberg Business. Bloomberg Business wrote, yet, and this is from an article, yet the SEC told the exchanges that it returned the filings because they didn't name the spot Bitcoin exchange with which they are expected to have a surveillance sharing agreement. or provide enough information about the details of those surveillance arrangements. Asset managers can update the language and refile. A CBOE spokeswoman said it plans to update and refile. NASDAQ and the SEC declined to comment. So there you go. So the assumption is that through the grapevine, through the connections that be, BlackRock knew that the way to get around the filing mishaps that occurred by every other fund for literally a decade was to go forward with this, again, this surveillance sharing agreement, SSA. So they did that. But apparently it was a little bit too vague for the SEC because they didn't list a specific crypto spot exchange. Now you can kind of see where this is going probably if you've been paying attention, right? Have you guessed what's happening? Well, look at this. Also on June 30th, before we knew for sure, Attorney John Deaton tweeted out the following. I just bought Coinbase stock because when these ETF applications get amended, I expect they will all list Coinbase. And then your NFA, which stands for not financial advice. So he's noting here, okay, we just heard through the grapevine that BlackRock got swatted down, but that's BlackRock. Is that really going to be a permanent slap down? No, that doesn't sound likely, does it? So what do you think would be most likely? Refile, but you have to name a spot exchange, which is the spot exchange that since August of last year has been partnering with BlackRock. That's Coinbase. And so John Deaton, upon hearing this information, he decided to purchase some quantity of Coinbase stock. Moving forward, so check this out. And then he said, of course I could be 100% wrong. Does BlackRock, ARK, Fidelity, etc. name Coinbase as their exchange when the SEC is suing Coinbase for essentially running an illegal exchange? We heard NASDAQ was going to do Bitcoin custody. Will these ETF filers list Coinbase or an incumbent? And so it wasn't a guaranteed, but Attorney Deaton took an educated guess here. And he looked like he was pretty well right, because even before the biggest news breaking, literally yesterday, having to do with BlackRock, because it did go through, here you had a hint that this is what everybody was going to do, because this method had already been copied by other firms in terms of the surveillance arrangement. That was already copied by all the firms. So if BlackRock was going to have a problem with this, so was every other firm that filed in a similar manner. That was the assumption. So here you had the first indication that this is the way that they were going to go. So here is the headline from CoinDesk. It was a tweet just in, and this is June 30th. Coinbase will be CBOE's surveillance partner for the Fidelity-linked spot Bitcoin ETF, according to a refiled application. And so then Attorney Deaton said, I guess my first instinct was correct. It will be interesting to see if the others list Coinbase. And yeah, that's, as far as I'm aware, that's pretty much what all of them have done. And with the biggest one being the BlackRock one. In fact, when BlackRock, that news broke, here's a 5-day chart of Coinbase stock price. You can see where I'm circling this part right here. Yesterday, just shot on up as soon as that news broke. So congratulations, Attorney Deaton. Looks like your hunch paid off. It does look like that. And then Andrew shared this also. He wrote, update, 4 different conversations yesterday evening. Bitcoin spot ETF landscape. Fully expect Coinbase and CBOE to become tied at the hip. Coinbase could be biggest winner in all of this. BlackRock will still be first and could be the only spot Bitcoin ETF approved. Now, folks, again, that's what I've been hearing for over a year at this point. BlackRock, just the part that BlackRock would be the first. That's been the expectation. That seems to have been what's been coordinated behind the scenes for a long time. And so if it's not the case that this was coordinated, then it's just the longest string of damn coincidences in my entire crypto life, where stuff just keeps panning out in this direction. And I admit, of course, it doesn't mean for sure that BlackRock's the first to get approved. Sometimes weird stuff in life happens, but my guess would be that they will be the first to get approved. And then at some point, others will also be approved. Because once the floodgates are open, they're open. But then BlackRock gets first mover advantage. And then Andrew also said, anyone that doesn't think there will be an approval of magnitude isn't watching the scale of traditional finance exchanges involved. NASDAQ, CBOE, NYSE. The BlackRock submission has an airtight architecture with Coinbase and NASDAQ that is unlike others. So that's why I started the video by pointing out that when it comes to the merging of XRP and crypto in general and traditional finance, you've been watching aspects of it unfold for a long time. However long you've been in crypto, if you've been paying attention. For me, it's over half a decade. It'll be in November, it'll be 6 years for me. But it's speeding up in a very, very important way. When you're talking about finally, we're going to have a spot Bitcoin ETF, and I do believe it's going to happen. I believe that's what's most probable, anyway. Again, hard to overstate the degree to which this is highly consequential for everybody in crypto, and we're here before almost every human on the planet and before almost every institution on the planet. That is why there's an opportunity for life-changing wealth in crypto. That's a big part of this. We're here first. It's just insane to me. It's my brain is split. Blows my simple little mind. And that's why I'm going to go into great detail here to break down to you everything that's unfolding in the order in which it's been occurring. And so those most recent comments, the ones on your screen here, those are from July 1st. So that brings us exactly to where the most recent news is. So here's the article from CoinDesk, July 3rd. BlackRock Bitcoin ETF application refiled, naming Coinbase as surveillance sharing partner. Which is why, folks, despite the onslaught, it just seems like it really is what Attorney Deaton said. It's a very plausible theory that it's just to make more room for the incumbents, destroy existing crypto infrastructure, the legacy crypto infrastructure, if you will, for legacy finance players. And then just, rubber stamp everything after that. Hey, everything's fine. Actually, you know what? We're going to ease up on the attacks on crypto, right? So that's what's going to happen. So it's not the case that XRP is going to cease to look at all these attacks, which are infuriating. And yes, we're disgusted by them and they are gross. It's, to some degree, doesn't it make it feel at a minimum as though there's a bit of showmanship going on when it comes to something specifically like this? Doesn't it seem like there's this plan in place? Because you have to, especially if you're following the cases, it's just there's a 0% chance that an underlying asset like XRP would ever be found to itself be a security. It's about a 0% chance. Let that run all the way up to the Supreme Court. It's about a 0% chance. That's my unprofessional opinion because I don't have a legal background. But that's what I believe. That is what I believe. So all of this is happening. It's all getting swatted out, but it's not permanent. Everything's going to bounce back, and there is going to be a way for everything to move forward. We just have to endure this in the meantime. That's the broader point that I'm trying to make. It's not going to cease to exist. It's just really messy because incumbent players want certain things and looks like they're getting it. So anyway, here's the latest from CoinDesk. This is the biggest news from yesterday. The NASDAQ exchange has refiled its application to list BlackRock's proposed Bitcoin exchange-traded fund, joining rivals in naming the U.S. exchange Coinbase as the market that will be monitored in a so-called surveillance sharing agreement. The refiling follows feedback reportedly given to applicants for spot Bitcoin ETFs by United States securities regulators that filings were inadequate without the name of the partner in the surveillance sharing agreements, which are supposed to help guard against market manipulation. Several other pending applications, including one on behalf of BlackRock's money management rival Fidelity, have since been updated to name Coinbase as the partner for the surveillance sharing agreements. The sponsor of a Bitcoin trust must enter a surveillance sharing agreement with a regulated market of significant size to secure a go-ahead from regulators based on a reading of according to the SEC's previous rulings. According to the new filing from NASDAQ, the exchange came to terms June 8th with Coinbase on a surveillance sharing agreement. Coinbase has represented approximately 56% of dollar to Bitcoin trading on US-based platforms year to date, according to the filing. And so that's the latest, and that's the order in which it all happened. So am I worried about my XRP? Not particular. So I could say, I could articulate things as though I'm worried it's possible we get a bad rule in the SEC v. Ripple case. But if you want to know what I'm thinking big picture, am I actually worried about whether or not XRP gets to exist in the United States if you just let enough time pass? No, I'm really not. I'm really not. It can be really messy in the short term. I can't predict that. I don't know. I'm optimistic. But that's why I wanted to share all that. Do you see how this has been unfolding? And it's just, I look at what I've been told for over a year now and how it just keeps panning out exactly like I was told it's supposed to from people in the know in the grapevine. I'm just like, Because I'm not told stuff like that all the time. I'm not. Almost never. But here I was told something this consequential, and it just happens to be playing out. What a coincidence! Methinks not. Then there's this from Attorney Deaton. He says the SEC / Gary Gensler are essentially claiming Coinbase is running an illegal business, yet the largest asset manager in the world and others are disclosing their intent to do business with this illegal business. It tells you all you need to know about what's really going on. Isn't it something? Think about this. The SEC is asserting all that it's being done illegally, but BlackRock still, they're not concerned about, despite those SEC allegations, they're not concerned to just slap Coinbase's name on their spot Bitcoin ETF, application. Why might that be? Like, come on. Like, what a bunch of nonsense, right? This is completely absurd. Coinbase is going to be fine. They're going to be fine. I'm not a financial advisor. You should not buy or sell anything because of anything I say or write. That would be a very, very, very bad idea. Until next time, to the Moon Family Sedan.